Hello and welcome into Sorare Rabbit Hunting here on the Sorare Data YouTube channel. I'm Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdino on Sorare. Today to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, mostly not the things that I normally talk about since I had almost no cards going last weekend, because of the international break. And those cards that I did have weren't even that great. I am going to get into a complaint about the game week deadline, and it's not because of daylight savings, although I did hear some feedback about that as well. There was a show that we did, there was a strategy show that we did a few weeks ago. Maybe it's a few months ago at this point. Depends how you want to count it. And it led to basically a bit that we do now that is about Sean cursing. And the foundation of the anger of that show was about the new deadline changes and how that affected the J League and the K League. And Sean was quite passionate about it on that show, which eventually led to his suspension. And I just kind of let him go with it because I don't have a ton of J League and K League cards. And he just had enough passion for both of us. But this game week that we just had, this midweek, which is then turning into this weekend, is an instance where I am going to get angry. Now, this is like me angry. I'm not actually going to get angry. There's nothing I can do about it. And so, but I'm going to go into that in a second. First off, thank you to everybody who's here, including all the lurkers. Whether it's David Alves was first in chat. Thank you for hopping in here. David Blue Tomatoes is here. Connor, hello. If you guys could hit the like button, always really helpful. I am debating Scosmo. What's up? Thanks for coming. So I'm going to touch on a bunch of things today. One of which is my anger about the J League or the schedule and the deadline. But I also literally just finished like minutes ago. Might have been a reason why I was a little late. Finished Nellis's interview with Dan and Aalok from Sorare, which I think anybody who plays Sorare football should go watch or listen. It's on the So Far Sorare podcast feed. There's just a lot of great stuff in there. And apparently this is a thing that they're going to start doing. And for those who want even more, on Monday, let me just actually share this right away. On Monday, on the French Sorare Data channel, which is over on Twitch, we have Nicola, who's going to be speaking with Maxime and Erwan. And then Maxime and I are going to, Maxime will translate the conversation since it's going to be in French, and I don't speak French still, despite Mike Baston, afternoon, sir, asking me every week if I speak French. I don't. But we're going to go translate it and just kind of discuss the conversation. That's going to replace the strategy show next week. So that's going to be on Monday. Sean is not suspended this time, even though there are a plethora of reasons that he could be suspended. He is not. He's just gone. Glenn, hello. I'm not going to drop a hammer. Well, I don't think I am. We'll see where I end up. Rikoman, hello. Thanks for joining. So Mike's asking, what was friend for share again? To be honest, as soon as he said it, it went right past me. I'm like that with names too. Like when I meet people, I'm just like really bad remembering people's names where they introduce and they're like, hello, I'm whatever, Mike. And I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. And I know there's that trick where you're supposed to be like, oh, nice to meet you, Mike. And I just don't do it. And so I can't even forget the word for French because I just didn't, and it was never it was never known for me to actually forget it. So sorry, Mike. I don't know if Angus here is trying to say that Lairdino is French for share, which would be really funny. But anyway, let me start with the Nellis interview. So there was a bunch of stuff that came out. A lot of people have already listened to it. And it's funny, I called it a Nellis interview. But the first thing I'll say is that it sounds like this is going to be something that Sorare will have in the future. Like they're going to have people from Sorare on community streams or podcasts or whatnot. And I'll be honest that when I first heard that they were doing this and like this was the plan, I thought it was just kind of weird that they just didn't have their own podcast and stream network where they could have these conversations. But I actually think that would have been the easy way out, because when you go on community streams and podcasts, I think you get a more realistic view of the community, because there's somebody there who is actively participating, can come with the follow-up questions. And obviously, whenever there's an announcement like that, they're going to have people on, the Twitter's flooded with replies of questions they want to ask. And I think Dan and Aalok did a really good job of addressing pretty much everything that they could. It's always weird to me that everyone thinks that they should be like 100% transparent and should tell us like exactly where we are on the J League license negotiation, all this stuff, but they're under no obligation, I don't think, to provide kind of that level. And so I don't expect it. And I think that they were really open with what they were happy with, what they were frustrated with, sort of some of the plans. So I think it was a really good listen or watch, however you do it. And I highly recommend it. Rikimon said they had some pre-agreed points. But I think yes, they did. But I think the pre-agreed points covered a lot of what people wanted to hear about. One thing that they were kind of discussing was the whole burning technique. And the only thing I can think about whenever I hear people suggesting burning is it feels like it's a supply solution that the users have to fix, even though it's the company that created them. I know it's a big Top Shot thing, and I don't actually think supply is a big problem in Sorare. And I know there are plenty of people who disagree with me on that, but I don't know. We'll see. There were no specifics about what the burning thing was going to be, so I'm not going to try to guess what it is, because I just don't think it's worth it. But there was a point in the stream I watched. Well, I actually did a little bit of both. But there was a point where I was like, I should really write this down. I don't want to go like touch on everything that they discussed, but I was like, I should write this down because I'm going to forget. And I didn't have a pen because it's 2023. I haven't used a pen in like 4 years. And I couldn't find a pen and I didn't write it down and I forgot. And yeah, I could have just typed it, I guess. Now that I think about it, I could have done that, but I didn't. So anyway, I would just go listen to that, because like I said, they cover a lot. They touch on things that I actually thought that they could have avoided, not avoided in the sense that they had to, but like bugs on the site that come up, or like the mass account suspension that happened accidentally, and like they addressed that stuff. And I think it was really good that they did that. And so I think, I don't know how much Nicola is going to differ from what they say. Obviously, they all have very different roles. Speaking of roles, so basically, Aalok is the football, they call it general manager. So I assume oversees everything when it comes to football. And then Dan is obviously the community manager. And Dan made a joke at the beginning that like his job was like to be a punching bag for everybody. And I'll be honest, like he was obviously joking about it, but he was joking about it because it's also true. And I think I'm amazed that he is able to do as well of a job as he does, because it's the internet. So I think a lot of people say things that they would never say in person. And a lot of that ends up directed at Dan or towards him. And one, like, that's not fair, but also like, I think we could all just do a better job of being nicer to other people. And that's a weird thing to say, because, but it's also something that we talked about on office hours a few times, because Maxime is also, I don't want to say he's like big into that, because it's absurd to be like, yes, I'm really big into just being kind. And it's like, so I understand that people can have like huge frustrations when it comes to Sorare, or Sorare data if we have something that bothers you, but there's a way to get things that you want, and it's usually just by being nice. So thank you to the three of those guys for having that discussion. Particularly thank you to Dan for everything that he does to the community. Like, I think we really underrate how important he is and how good he is at what he does. So, Dan, you're probably not watching, but thank you anyway. So now I'm going to get angry. So one of the things we talked about, I am actually going to go into this. So one of the things that came up with the game week deadline change was this, like, it's Friday morning for me, but basically the early Friday games were basically being moved from weekends to midweeks. And it seemed like most of the responses were kind of like, well, it's just like this many games for each team, and it doesn't really matter because you still get the points for the midweek, blah, blah, blah. And I think one of the big issues that was missed or misunderstood or ignored, or they just didn't care, was if you had a player move from a weekend to a midweek, then there's a possibility that you don't have a lineup. Because if you had, let's say you had 5 cards, and I know most of us have more, but if you had 5 cards and now one of them is playing in the midweek, now you have 4 cards you have 1 card for the midweek and 4 cards for the weekend. And that's now your lineup is gone. And so that basically happened to me this midweek. And I wouldn't say normally I would just be like, okay with it. But the reason why, well, I'll show you exactly why. The reason why it was particularly painful for me, and again, this is not just a me issue, but I'm talking about me, is that it included a super rare goalie, which is not like the best thing to lose when you just don't have that many. So I put a lineup in because we got to farm these so rare coins, excuse me. And I got a clean sheet from my goalkeeper, my super rare goalkeeper, who had an L15 of something low, where I would have put them in a cap to like 43 right now. And then Kevin McAllister, who played yesterday. Like, I actually won't even count McAllister in this. McAllister played on Thursday. It seemed like Argentina had a few early matches. But Nishikawa played at 6 a.m. today. For me, 6 a.m. Eastern, which was the old deadline. So he would have been part of the weekend game week previously. But I lost the ability to use him in the weekend right after they moved the super rare threshold. They double it. And while I do have a super rare, like, I have another super rare goalie that I could use, thankfully. But there are plenty of people who do not have that. And if they had Nishikawa, now they can't enter cap 240 or super rare 240 because they don't have their goalie. And that's a bummer. I don't know what the solution is. Obviously they don't have a solution, but I'm going to pretend to be really angry about this, because surely my cap 240 side this game week is going to be short on points that I could have just gotten with Nishikawa. So just to prepare everyone for my anger when it happens. Rikuman, so I believe it was Aalok that kept calling them so coins, and Dan had to correct him. And which I loved, because when they announced it, everyone called them so coins because it just makes sense to call them so coins. And so, but they're not. They're so rare coins, or just coins, just for the record. Blue Tomato said, I think they don't want to find a solution. It's just okay for them. So I don't think that's right. I just don't think that they have a better solution. And I'm not sure there one exists. And they kept talking about, well, you should have different deadlines for different regions, meaning like Champion Europe doesn't have to lock at the same time as Champion Asia, which this would have meant Champion Asia was at 6 a.m. and 6 a.m. lock, along with All-Star, along with all the cap modes, along with all U23s. And I think it makes it confusing to have deadlines all the time. And that's actually one of my biggest pushbacks on people who want, I mean, that's basically rolling locks, but people also want late swap. And there's an ease of playing Sorare where like the deadline hits and you're done and you don't have to like constantly check online. Like you can check on your teams when you want, as opposed to being forced to check on your teams every time you have somebody else who's going to have, every time lineups come out for every game. Like the bigger gallery you have, you theoretically could just have lineups coming out all the time, meaning club lineups to find out if you have players in your Sorare lineups that have games. And so, yeah, Blue Tomatoes made it sound like rolling locks was basically a back end issue. And they're blaming that. And I don't doubt them that it's a real pain to deal with that, but I actually don't even think it's a solution. And plenty of people will disagree with me because they hate eating DNPs for basically time issues. But I don't think that there is a reasonable way to fix the problem without making the game work. Meaning it becomes a chore. And that's kind of the opposite of what we want. I'm going to make myself bigger here. Like, we don't want this game to turn into a chore. And so there are some people who treat this very much like a chore. So Blue Tomato saying they bring it up, it's possible in the NBA. The problem is that that's one league. And I don't think that's really what people want. I think what people want in terms of these rolling locks are like Asia locks at, let's call it 6 a.m. today. That's, again, Eastern, my time. But like, so Asia, all the All-Stars, all the cap modes lock at 6 a.m. today, and then Champion Europe will lock at 2 or whenever the hours are. I just don't think that makes for a good gaming experience for anyone. And so, yeah. Yeah, Kai was saying this is a similar issue without Kevin McAllister. My America lineup for the weekend is significantly weaker. So McAllister is different, though, because McAllister had like a true midweek game. Like that game was Thursday for them. Like that's a match that previously would have been a Thursday match or a midweek. So it hurts for sure. Like I am also losing McAllister this weekend, but that happens because like there are midweeks, but like Nishikawa would have been in this game week had they not moved the deadline. And it's obviously not just Nishikawa. Like all of these guys here, although the scores weren't even that good, but like if you have Akimoto, excuse me, like that's a gigantic score that you lose out on for the weekend, and it's just a bummer. Like I get it, I totally understand it. We actually did get news today, like Friday morning for me, news before deadline. Like there was Oshiman was ruled out and Robin Proper was out, and like that's actionable information that we got before the deadline. So it worked. Finally worked. And all we had to do was sacrifice Shusaku Nishikawa for two players I don't even have. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say on it. As you can see, I was very passionately upset about it. Looking back from last week, I obviously could have won All-Star Limited with JMO and Ladero. I won a Tier 4 Limited, who I don't less than a point away from a Tier 3. I don't even remember who it was. And so like MLS played last week. I guess I could. I believe Oshiman is out, yes. So Blue Tomato is saying regional locks are okay. But like it's almost like you're making, not that the regional competitions are less important. I mean, obviously Champion Europe is very, very important for everybody. But it just seems weird to have like a Champion Europe deadline way different than All-Star or U23 or all the cap mode. Like you can't. And then there's the idea that like players lock when their games lock. And from a quality of life, I don't want that. But I'm selfishly, like I don't want to have to deal with that all week. I go outside on the weekends, unlike my strategy show co-pilot. And so I like to be out and not have to constantly be on my phone looking at lineups. I'm fine opening the Sorare data lineup or app and checking on my lineups when I want to, but I don't want like alarms to go off in the middle of whatever I'm doing on the weekend and being like, oh man, I have to do this or do that or all this other stuff. So I get Tuggy saying weekends just stay outside. Sure. I don't really go outside much during the week. But weekends I like to go outside. Spring is coming. Spring is here, excuse me. I like being outdoors. Sue me. But anyway, so I guess there was MLS last weekend, and I did have some decent scores, but for some reason, I just didn't do anything right. I was just unlucky, clearly. Joe Bendick, just the absolute worst goalkeeper in the world. And oh, that's right. I forgot there was this lineup, which apparently has been updated again. 249.2 points in Cap 240 Super Rare. Just such a kick in the face. Like, that was a bummer. Big bummer. Theoretically, I could have definitely played Guzan instead of Runnerson, and so made the right decision there by 65 points. But ultimately, there was just not a whole lot going on. And so, let's see. Do I even have, like, if I had played Mensa 58 here, like I was 90 points away from a reward here. And I mean, like, Stuver's score was actually pretty good, even without a clean sheet. But Bradley kind of let us down a little bit. That game was disgusting, apparently, with those two combining for like 80 points. So yeah, there just like wasn't that much. And it actually made me think more about the rewards that I could have won. And I looked them up beforehand because I do it for the thumbnail. And Connor's saying Cap 240 is such a pain. I hate having to play one crap player that you know will ruin it. I actually don't feel that way about 240. Like, I didn't think that lineup was that bad, was it? Like, there was no one in that lineup where I'm like, oh, this guy is going to kill it. Meaning kill the lineup. And like, the rare one, obviously, I mean, Thor was never going to actually play, but like this lineup, I didn't think there was any chance I was coming up short. Like, I was like, I have 5 guys who start and I'll be fine. And I think Runnerson actually got the clean sheet like early in the game week. And I was like, I'm good. And I was 0.8 of a point short. It's kind of amazing to see a center back have a negative 11 AA. But that's just the joys of Liga MX sometimes. But like everyone else, I mean, there were no decisives. Obviously, one decisive other than the clean sheet, and this wins easily. It wins meaning gets me the threshold. But we didn't. That's what happens. I also noticed that I keep saying we for my lineups. And I notice a lot of like content creators do this. I don't know why. It just like naturally feels like I should be saying we. Isn't that weird? It feels weird. But it like naturally says it. I don't know. So what was I going to talk? Oh, the rewards for last week. So one of the things that comes up a lot is whether midweek. Yeah, but so Sean's like, you and the chat. Sean, look at you. Look at you watching. But like, they're not me and the chat's lineups. Right. Blue Tomato, that's our gallery. Yeah. This is the opposite of multi-accounting. It's actually multiple people. Yeah. No, I don't know. So I don't know if I'll keep doing it or not, but it is. You and your, yeah, we are. You and your cards. Oh, okay. Me and all the cards. I like that. I like that. All right, let me expand a little bit here. So the one thing that we've talked about previously, and I think we wrote about it once in a Sorare Data newsletter, which I promise are not gone forever, that midweek rewards are not as good as weekend rewards, meaning like if you win all-star, whatever, rare pro, rare, super rare, in a midweek, the rewards tend not to be as good on the weekends. And sometimes that gets thrown off a little bit because I'm pretty sure they gave away like an Mbappe once in a midweek or a Haaland, whatever it was. But generally when people get like disappointing rewards in a midweek, most reasonable people are like, well, it was a midweek. And they're like, oh, you're right. All right. Like scores are usually not as high to win because there are not as many clubs playing. And so it just kind of happens. But we're really not seeing that on the limited side, which comes about partially because there's so many cards that like they can afford to give away a lot. But like we see like Haaland, Kvaratskhelia, Saka, Bellingham, Wirtz, like that is a banger top 5 for All-Star Limited for a midweek during an international break with some MLS sprinkled in. And so, and even Rodrigo is like a great card. And so, I mean, we see De Bruyne here. That's wild. Is Griezmann really above De Bruyne in terms of value? Crazy. So that's for All-Star Limited. Oh, I'm sorry. Blue Tomato is right. 357 wasn't a midweek. It was just that it was an international break. So we actually haven't seen 358 yet. So who knows what those will be. But I started to think like maybe it's not so bad. But like All-Star Rare, Lucas Chevalier is like, you'd be furious, right? If you won All-Star Rare and that was your top, or you finished second and you got Driussi, like those are the 2 stars that they gave away. Drake Callender for 4th. And I realize that's a tier 1 already. Gavardiol being between Drake Callender and Zach McMath is amazing. I did not even notice that at first, but I bet Alex won there is really pumped that they didn't finish 4th or 6th. Just saying. Like Van Dijk. Oh, look at that, Maxime. So Maxime won Van Dijk, and had he finished higher, would have gotten Zach McMath. That is the beauty of So Rare right there. Anyway, so that was All-Star Rare. All-Star Rare Pro, KDB first, and then just seems like a huge drop-off. Like, I know that these guys are good. Like, don't get me wrong. But they just don't feel like... Well, De Bruyne does. But to have Rui as the second best prize in All-Star Rare Pro just feels weak. And obviously it's a international break plus MLS, so you don't get a lot. We saw the quadruple goalkeeper, quintuple, I guess, for the yeah. So we got everybody who got on a podium in All-Star Super Rare won a goalie, and including YNWA, who got 2 of them. And maybe that's kind of what happens on international breaks, that not enough people play. But it kind of just got me thinking, like, our international... Let me backtrack. Well, no. So the point was, should you go out of your way to prioritize international play? And we see this right after the game week, where Nathan Ake had a 100 all-around score in a match that didn't count, which we learned also from the So Far So Rare podcast. That will count, meaning if this happens again, it will count, because Nathan Ake had the double game week, 102.9 all around, but because it was a double game week and he played in the Dutch loss to the French when he had 30, that was the score that you got. But instead he got the 102 in the second game, where basically everyone crushed. Dumfries had 100. I think he had 67 all around. And then Daley Blind, which is incredible, 28 all around in 27 minutes. They just absolutely destroyed Gibraltar. I believe France plays Gibraltar in the next set of international matches, which means my God, the scores. But there are guys that are good like so rare scorers and play for countries that are not the Netherlands or France, and sometimes have situations where they can play really well. And the one that always jumps out at me, shout out to Gator Guy 231, who was kind of the first one for me, at least, on the Teddy Tuma train. So Teddy Tuma plays for Malta or represents Malta, and sometimes can play really well. He takes all set pieces, and it's not like a banger card, but like it can be pretty good. And my thought was, are the people who are winning these, or who are winning these international breaks, are they doing it with guys like Tuma, or is it guys that are playing for these huge international teams that are just smashing people? Like we saw, like Sean is in the chat here. Our good friend Jimmer played, and Orange Fly played Ronaldo last game week. And it was like, well, Portugal play against two minnows. There is nothing Ronaldo likes more than beating up on small nations in international play. And Ronaldo had two huge game weeks. Did he have 5 goals in the 2 games? 4 goals. And I mean, Liechtenstein and Luxembourg are exactly the kind of games that you want Ronaldo in. And so obviously they're not a ton of Ronaldo cards. It's not even that great of a card to have. Like you can get one for $300 right now. Sean's absolutely right. No one comes to play harder than Ronaldo versus a small nation. I mean, the dude this is where all of these records that he has, like it comes from banging goals against Liechtenstein. So yeah, there you go. McTominay. Was that brace against Spain? Is that what it was? Let's see quickly. Scott McTominay. Was it against Spain? It was. Oh, and then 2 goals off the bench against Cyprus. Look at McTominay. Woo! Can have him for $46. Oh no, the floor is higher than that now. But anyway, so my thought was, is there, while the rewards may not be great during international play, winning anything is fun. And sometimes you can win something really good. And so is it worth making teams with maybe guys like McTominay, who are not quite as good SO5 wise in club play, and to get them in their international stuff? And one guy that I think breaks this a little bit and ended up playing pretty well last week was Bakasetas, who, like, Greece is not the greatest international side, but here he is against Gibraltar, and he gets a quick 100. And so that was just my thought, is can you get not that Bakasetas is cheap, but could you get Tuma and McTominay and guys like that? And does that get you to the top? And so I went back to last weekend and was just thinking, who won these things? And then, yeah, Blue Tomatoes, Sabitzer. Yep, that's it. And I went to just to see what the winning lineup was. And it was like, okay, who are these no names? Oh, Mike Mignon, Pavard, Bakasetas, Mbappe, and Tadic, which goes against everything that I was thinking. I mean, not to say that good international players, like obviously France is a very dominant team. And so when they have the right opportunity, but at least for this past game week, it was like, oh no, you actually did need the big boys. Courtois, Mavropanos, Bakasetas, Mbappe, Tadic. Like that, it's just tough to like, oh, there we go. There's wow, that is an amazing Pug Trader. Cardenas, Curbelo, Vieira, Christian Espinoza, and Tadic. Love that. What did that win? What is this? All-Star Limited. All right. So probably not anything huge. And then we see some more MLS here. Dan Bob won All-Star Rare Pro with Mignon, Henry Kessler, Ladero Super Rare, Hector Herrera Super Rare, and Mbappe. Wow. Love seeing Hector Herrera and Mbappe in the same lineup. One of my favorite things about Sorare. Or Henry Kessler and Kylian Mbappe. So Santa's Boys is saying the kings for smaller countries are always good. I don't know if they're always good, but they're always good when they play Gibraltar or stuff like that. And so, oh, all right. Hello. And so I think there is something to it. It's just like I can't imagine it's worth the resource expenditure to get these types of players just for internationals. And obviously you're going to end up having to pay more for them if you're buying them like just before the international week. And so I'm just not sure how viable strategy is. But if you just play the right matchups, like you should get there. I think. But obviously, so like a lot of people were buying certain players before the World Cup because they're like, oh, I want to have lineups during the World Cup. And we kind of talked about how crazy that was. But obviously you have just very good lineups all over the place here. And maybe like the Nations League or the Euro qualifiers, they break the game a little bit because of stuff like that, the Gibraltar thing. But everybody likes utility. And so we just have to be happy about it. But I think there are situations where you'll be able to take advantage of these small country kings. And last game week just wasn't one of them. The Sinner 86 said, I bought Freuler and Vidmer for $6. They both had 86 points. That's awesome. That's awesome. And then, yeah, it's definitely advantageous to have cards like that. It just requires a lot of work to like figure out who those guys are. I mean, it's probably not that much work, to be honest, but at some point you need to know where it is. So Sean's like Ronaldo. I wouldn't call Ronaldo like a small country king, but at his price now, I think it'd be worth it. It's a bummer that he never got any limiteds. I think he'd be a really popular limited, but 0.169 and theoretically could help you win a reward during these weeks. And the number of prizes is obviously low during this time, but it's not so low that you can't compete. And I don't know, maybe it's worth it. I can assure you that I'm not going to do it, but we could see some stuff happen this summer where there were a lot of people who, I know some people are looking at which country is it that plays which European country is it that plays during the summer? Is it Norway? If anybody in chat knows. And I saw some people like buying those cards and they're like, well, I'll have some summer utility. And it's like, I think that there are these qualifiers in the summer and like, they're going to, yeah, like this is mid-June that they'll have some. I mean, it's only a little bit, but if you could just get those situations like Ronaldo versus Iceland, as yeah. Hardest part is goalkeepers for the internationals. That's not wrong, but there are plenty. I mean, Runner Runnerson is the Icelandic goalkeeper. And so I think it's, if you do the work now, you could have the goalkeeper for the summer. And again, it's not a lot. So literally only these couple matches, but I don't know. It's not crazy. Again, I'm not going to do it, but just something that you guys can think about. What else we got? I was going to touch on some NBA and MLB stuff. I don't know if anybody comes here with that expectation that it's only football, but they announced today. Do I want to go there? Before I get there, I had the opportunity to go to a Knicks game this week and the Yankees home opener, thanks to Sorare. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone, mostly John over at Sorare, for inviting me to those. I think tickets and being able to experience real life stuff is going to be like the next phase of Sorare, and which I think is great. I think the opportunity to go to sporting events or get jerseys or all this stuff, kind of all the things that we're dreaming of about the club shop, I think is going to be really important for people who play Sorare, just because at some point winning only cards is not enough, or they're not going to have enough cards for all of us to win, and they're just not going to throw cash at our face all the time. And so quick story, I went to the Yankee game yesterday, I'm a lifelong Yankee fan, but I really haven't paid attention to baseball, like really been into it for the last few years. But I've probably gone to well over 100 Yankee games in my life. And so I went to the home opener yesterday, and I went to, all the tickets are now on your phone, and I went to scan my phone, and it said that the ticket had already been used. And it ended up being a kind of more of a tech issue than anything else. But I have to say that John over at Sorare, he's the community manager for NBA and MLB, was just amazingly helpful throughout the whole thing. I did eventually get in, thanks to John's effort. So I just wanted to take like a quick second to thank him for that, and to thank him for the invite to the Knick game. I went to the Knick game with Mike Zakarian from Team Hold. Some people who watch this also are heavy Team Hold people. So it was fun to finally meet Mike. We've done a few shows together, but I had never met him in person. And then being able to go to the Yankee game yesterday and talk to a few other Sorare managers. Shout out to Larry, who I chatted with for a good amount of time. He's also a lifelong Yankee fan. And it was just fun. It was really fun. And I think being able to do stuff like that, thanks to Sorare, is awesome. And so I hope that like a lot of other people get to experience that, whether it's using their coins or just Sorare giving out tickets for having the funniest sounding gallery name or whatever it is. I know it ends up being a logistical nightmare, I'm sure, planning and scheduling all that stuff, but we don't have to deal with that. It's what John and Dan have to do. So thank you to them for that. So speaking of NBA, I saw that the Luka Doncic unique is now on the market. This is a card that I think people have been waiting for all season. I think it easily would have been the most expensive card ever sold, NBA card, had they done this 2 or 3 months ago. And now I'm not even sure it makes the top 5. And a lot of that just has to do with timing. And I feel bad because we should all be really excited about it. And unfortunately, like my initial response was just like, why did this take so long? And this is a card I'm not buying. Like I'm never going to be in a position, not never, that's not true. And so it was just kind of frustrating that it finally happened. So it ends in 118 hours. Santa's saying they discussed this in the team whole is that the NBA bit today? I haven't watched the NBA bit today, but ignoring the fact that the Mavs might miss the playoffs and this card will have like 5 games of utility for this season. And obviously the whole is like, you own these cards forever. You can use this card next year. God knows when the 2023-24 card unique will come out. But it just seems like such a swing and a miss. Sorry to use a baseball term for basketball. Such an air ball to do it now. It's like March 31st. And even if the Mavericks were in like easy playoff position, like you've lost like so much utility, and you had a number of managers who would have really liked this card. And I honestly think that the number of managers who would have bought the card is much lower now than if they had done this 3 months ago. And Blue Tomato said, maybe it's not all about the money. I'm not even talking about the money part of it. Obviously that plays a huge role, but if it's about the game, they waited too long to have arguably the best player, fantasy player. And the fact that we don't even have Jokic either, who is going to most likely win MVP or at least be top 2. I don't get it. And this came up with football uniques, and at the end of basically a year ago, there was this, I think it was AJ. I can't remember if it was AJ or YNWA. I think it was AJ. That was like, hey, you have all these football uniques you haven't done yet, and the season's coming to an end. And this is obviously, we yesterday saw the Mbappe unique go to Roxy. And it's late in the season. and he, and obviously the expectations Mbappe plays much longer. So like, I don't think it, not that it doesn't matter. In fact, it very much matters that this came so late in the season. And I know they don't want to do, these. I don't know why they wait. Simple as that. I don't know why they wait. The only reason I can think of is that because not many people are buying cards towards the end of the season, it's a nice way to like boost revenue, which feels very simplistic and hopefully not true. But you could sort of make the other argument that the people who bought, I don't even remember when did last year's Mbappe? 11 months ago. So maybe they try to wait like a full year almost before there's another one. But it really doesn't make sense to me. Like I don't think we're ever going to get that kind of detail of like how they decide when uniques get auctioned. I don't think it's algorithmically. Is that a word? It sounds like a word, but it also sounds like I said it wrong. I don't know if there's an algorithm that decides when auctions happen, like when specific players' cards are auctioned. But it does feel like it needs to be manual when it comes to a lot of the uniques, like Kylian Mbappe. And so it's really hard for me to hear them talk about how important utility is and then come out with these cards so late in the season when there's minimal utility. And yes, they have this card next year and the next 10 years, and I get it. It's just not the way that we all play. Like, we all play with thinking very short-term utility. The only time people think about long-term utility is when they made a mistake. And they're like, well, it's fine. Like, I'll have this for 10 more years. Like, that's when we think of it. It's not when I'm buying this. It's like, I want to play this right now. Let me start getting a return on this card. And it just didn't happen. I haven't watched the Mbappe auction watch yet from Andy and Quinny. First off, thank you to the two of them, particularly Andy, for hosting that, since I was at the Yankee game, or trying to get into the Yankee game at the time. So I couldn't do it, but it looked fun. And the price obviously was very fun. Pranksy getting to 100 and deciding that, I guess, 112-ish, 115 was too much, is always really funny to me that people like decide that. Like, why was Bambi willing to go to 105 but not 115? And obviously there are limits. We all have a limit at some point, whether it's just like the limit of what they have on the site at the time. But it did feel like Roxy just wasn't letting that one go. Yeah, Split Geek saying Roxy shows who's the boss. I was surprised that J.R. Duke was nowhere to be seen, but maybe buying the Haaland for 76 earlier in the week was just enough, which maybe. I don't have that kind of bankroll, so maybe if you spend 76 earlier in the week, you can't spend 120. I do wonder if they would just keep going. Like, what? I mean, obviously this was the max that they were willing to go, but I just wonder if Bambi or Pranksy dropped 115 after this, if Roxy goes to 120. And everybody always talks about, they look at these huge auctions, if they want to look at them negatively, they're like, yeah, but only 2 people wanted the card. And it's like, well, fundamentally, like, that's how auctions work. Like, you only need 2 people, and then they just fight each other. It's like buying a house. You want the most money. You don't need 1,000 people to want your house. You need 2, and then they bid against each other, and hopefully you get the most if you're selling your house. But I think that this price was surprising to a lot of people. I didn't hear many people predicting over 100 for this card, and we saw 3 people bid 100 or above with Pranksy, Bambi, and Roxy. And I think Bellama came in really at 92. And so I think that's good. I don't think it tells us anything about the Sorare market or or how it affects, what this means for super rare and rare. And I don't think it means anything. I don't think unique cards are ever an indication of anything other than, are there two whales who want that specific card? I don't think the unique market tells us anything more than that. And so we obviously have, like, Roxy and Bambi have been around for a little bit. Bellama certainly, and Pranksy is new and splashing a ton of cash everywhere, and was willing to pay 100 ETH for this card, and that wasn't enough. And that seems wild. It seems good that Sorare is still a place where 3 people are willing to spend 100 ETH on one card. It's arguably the best available card you can get. Like, I don't look at Bambi. So Bambi, obviously, I wouldn't even call it price protecting. Like, Bambi and Max, I don't think are selling their Mbappe uniques. So this new one is the best available card. And so, like, on the platform, I don't think there's a better card to have. And so that's why the price can get pushed up. And we saw it get pushed up, and great. Now we can all just go back to our rares and limiteds and trying to get more value out of those. But this Doncic thing is just so disappointing. And Jokic not, like, I did a YouTube short after one of them. It might have been the Ja Morant. I think it was the Ja unique. Maybe it was the Anthony Davis was the most expensive at one point. And I did one, and I was like, he's the most expensive, but we haven't seen Giannis, we haven't seen Doncic, and we haven't seen Jokic. And then we saw the Giannis, and that was another one that was really entertaining. And that ended up going for more than Mbappe from an ETH perspective. I actually have no idea what the dollar amount. 187. Oh, so it's actually pretty similar. 187 for Giannis, right? That's 187,000 for the Giannis, and Mbappe 195. So pretty similar, which is actually kind of wild. Now that I hadn't put that together, actually. But I would have expected Luka to go more than Giannis. And now I don't think so. And now I just realized that my settings here say I'm black this entire time. Nobody told me. Ferdinand. Boy, that could have been very confusing for everyone, I'm sure. Thank God I said who I was at the beginning, or else you guys would have thought I was Andy. Anyway, so yeah, Giannis 187. I don't even want to guess what Luka goes for, because I just want to be like, I'm just going to be disappointed. Bellama has been getting a ton of NBA uniques, some of which at absurdly low prices for what I would consider them. I know the Steph Curry unique went, and that felt really cheap. It was like 9 ETH or something like that. And I realize I'm saying like something worth tens of thousands or bought for tens of thousands of dollars is cheap, but that felt cheap. I don't know. What am I doing here? Completed auctions. So I don't know. I just don't necessarily think it was the best time for Luka. I'll just put it that way. Like SGA, there's Steph. 6.2 ETH for Steph Curry unique, which is just wild to me. I see Bankero ended up at 7.7 to Pete. I don't know who that is. YNWA on that. Oh, Pete looks like they've got a bunch of good cards. Huh. Yeah, so Pete likes NBA. That's cool. And then, yeah, SGA was pretty cheap. Jaw dropped an Anton Black. So like, also, these are different people that we're seeing looking at these NBA uniques. Trae Young, I actually can't stand Trae Young, so I'm not even going to give him the satisfaction of clicking on that. And then yeah, Bellamon, Dimes for Days. I think they battled on something else too. They might have battled for this Giannis. And then neither of them won it, if I remember correctly. I think Max swooped in. Did I make that up? No, they're yeah. So Dimes for Days was in on it until 35 ETH, and then yeah, Max and Bellamon just went at it. But again, I just think the waiting so long on Luka is just, I think it was a mistake. Like I always try to be like really positive about Sorare and what they do, and I think waiting so long for Luka, and I don't know if there were contractual reasons for it. It seems random to me that would be an issue, but I do know that like obviously they released the LeBron one after he broke the scoring record, and they released the Mbappe one after he was named French captain. And I appreciate wanting to celebrate important events like that with the unique card, but the unique card doesn't indicate that those things happened, which is a whole nother thing. But nobody is looking at that Mbappe unique and they're like, well, that's the one after he became French captain. Or the LeBron one, and they're like, well, that's right after he set the scoring record. Like nobody, you look at the card and you don't know that. And so the timing doesn't matter. Like, are people more interested in LeBron when he set the scoring record? Sure. He's already really popular. And waiting for Doncic to do something. I mean, somebody brought it up in the chat. He had like some absurd, 60, 20, 10 game or whatever it was. And what was that game? 105. Of course, it was against the Knicks. Oh, yeah, December 27th. Like, this was one of the craziest games we've had all season. 60 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists. He won the game, or he sent the game into overtime by missing his own free throw, getting the rebound, and putting it back in. And that, like, wasn't enough to get his unique out. And then they just waited. And now I'm not sure what is the reason to do it now? Like, he hasn't done anything. The only thing that he's doing is getting closer and closer to missing the playoffs, leaving him with like a handful of games left for current season utility. And so I think Sorare just need to reevaluate the decision to auction big player cards when things happen, because you're just at the mercy of a big thing happening. And as we see with Luka or with Jokic, like it's not happening. So the MVP award comes out like during the playoffs, like deep in the playoffs. Like Jokic could be done. And it's like, are you really going to do the Jokic unique when he's not playing for another 3-4 months? And I think the answer is yes. So Mike's saying, I think they're keeping Jokic for MVP, and they might. And the only thing that makes that okay is if the card actually shows like that he won MVP. Otherwise, it's just like you have to tell somebody, and we've mentioned this on like all these different shows. If you have to tell somebody why your card is more valuable, like that's the year he won MVP, it doesn't matter. Like nobody needs a story for why your card is more valuable. People should see the card and be like, oh, okay, that's the MVP card. And so if they're not going to do that, then they totally blew this. And I'm sorry for saying that, but it is exactly how I feel. And I shouldn't care. Like, I'm not buying this card, but I selfishly benefit from more people being interested in Sorare. And when the story for this Luka now is going to be like, why is the Luka auction? Why is Luka worth half of Giannis? And you have to like go explain to people, because like when Anthony Davis's unique sold, it was the highest priced Sorare NBA card ever. And I remember seeing, I forget what the Twitter account is, collector guy or something like that. Someone big in the physical card space, but also in NFTs was like, this is the most expensive Sorare card. And the number of replies were like, that's ridiculous. Like, why would Anthony Davis be more? What about these other guys? And you have to be like, oh, well, they don't have the other ones yet. And like, that was the big thing. Anthony Davis was number one until Giannis. And then Giannis is number one potentially until Doncic or Jokic. But now, because of the timing, I'd be shocked if it went more than Giannis. And now you have this situation where like, well, why is, and not to take anything away from Giannis, but it's just like, why, how is Luka worth half? You're like, well, it's really based on utility, even though we say they're collectibles. And like the season was almost over and the Mavs missed the playoffs. And now you're like, so instead of this, oh yeah, this is the unique card that I got after he dropped 60 against the Knicks. It's like, oh, this is the unique card from the year that the Mavs traded for Kyrie and then missed the playoffs. And like, that's not the story you need to tell. And it's weird to me that to wait on the Jokic card, regardless if he wins MVP or not, because obviously there's a risk now that he doesn't win MVP. I think he's the favorite anyway, but if he doesn't win MVP, now you waited all this time because the Embiid unique already went. I think. Didn't it? Please, we did. Oh, we don't have Embiid either. I didn't realize that. Oh, my God. Okay, so do they come out with Embiid and Jokic at the same time when like both are up for MVP? So Blue Tomatoes, do you really think Doncic goes for more than Giannis? Like $185,000. I just think that these unique cards are the easiest way to generate buzz for Sorare. And I know that Sorare really tries to not emphasize the cost or the value aspect of these cards. Like you'll never see them tweet about the price. Like I remember when the first Erling Haaland unique went for 265 ETH, and everyone is like, how are you not telling everyone that you sold a 265 ETH NFT? And they were just very quiet about it. And I don't think that's wrong, but it allowed everyone else to talk about it. And I think that's great. And I think they would encourage that, silently encourage that. And so the point of these other uniques is it allows us to say, hey, there are people on this platform who are willing to put tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into single cards because they like the platform so much, or they trust it, or they think that it's going to be huge one day, and not auctioning some of the best players in the game takes away our ability as users to get excited about it and to talk about it and let other people talk about it. And you'll still get everyone, oh, money laundering and there's wash trading, but like we know that's not really the case with these cards. And to have three of the best players, meaning Doncic, who we now have on, but like as of yesterday, March 30th, in a season that ends in a matter of weeks, regular season, to not have Doncic, to not have Embiid, and to not have Jokic uniques is just wild. It's wild because those should be the cards that you plan on releasing at the beginning of like before the season starts. You should know when those cards are getting released. And if your plan was like late March and April, someone should be like, that's don't do that. Don't wait so long. Takes them out of the game, and it takes out the excitement of like the best players to have cards. And it's really like I'm just like disappointed at I want to be excited that this Luka Doncic unique card is like available, and it's weird to like be excited about something that I would never own, but it's like really difficult to do that when we've been saying for weeks, like, where is this card? And then it finally comes and it's like, It's actually like, I don't think better late than never is actually right in this instance. Like, I actually wonder if just never was the right answer if we were waiting this long. And at this point, like, we have no idea when Embiid or Jokic are coming. And so Ja Kun, I think, just says it well. It's not all about the money. Mbappe and Doncic uniques can revive the market sentiment and create social media buzz at the right moment. The price is relative. 100 ETH is a lot now, but maybe not so much then. Right. And yeah, Blue Tomatoes agrees with me, but it's too late. And Mike Basson says NBA season length means need to schedule one top unique auction per month. I don't even think it needs to be that set. Or like, I know they would never do this, and I know why they don't do this, but I think it would be really, really interesting if they had auctioned Embiid and Jokic uniques at the same time. And I feel like that happened. I feel like that happened with something in football. Maybe it was like somebody's unique and someone really good's super rare ended around the same time. But, and I know you theoretically want people to bid on both. Like, I from an economic standpoint, it's probably a terrible idea, because like the people who are willing to spend 100 ETH, let's say you're willing to spend 100 ETH on Embiid or Jokic, and you can't bid all the way up on both. But we do know that there are some big managers on the platform that that would be in on those. And it would be really interesting to see them go like at the same time, who's fighting for one. And then if like somebody, one of them gets really high, and like, I actually don't want to use names because I feel bad doing it. But like if two managers are going high on one, and then it gets to a level where one of them is like, I got to step out of this, and they go to the other one. I mean, I think that would be really fun. Oh, Kuni was saying the Neymar unique and Mbappe super rare. And then Isco said there was a Marquinhos and Courtois uniques at the same time. Like, oh, Quinny, I think you're right. I think it was actually vice versa, because I think it was I think the Neymar super rare ended a little bit before the Mbappe, but I think it was Neymar. I think you're right about that. But I think that would be like a fun event, but not now, because now it's just too late. They're going to do them. Like, I hope they do them, because I think it would be just wild to have an entire inaugural NBA season on Sorare and not have unique cards of Embiid and Jokic, literally the two MVP candidates. So, but I just wish it was all earlier. Blue Tomato said, what do you think of a reverse auction where the auction starts with 200 ETH and the price is lowered by 5 ETH every 2 minutes? I'm not sure I see the benefit. Generates more FOMO. How does that generate more FOMO than just going up instead of down? And why stop at why make 200 the cap? I realize that's an absurd amount of money, but I don't know. I'm going to go, because I feel like I'm in like a negative tone here, and I really don't want to be. But I'm also not going to completely change what I'm talking about just because I'm being negative. I said all these nice things. I had a great time. I think the NBA product is great. I have a lot of fun with it. But I think they could have done a better job on these, particularly for how much these uniques turn into user marketing tools and get people to talk about the product and become more aware of like, oh, wow, somebody spent. And again, I know that they don't want to like emphasize the money, but if somebody is spending $150,000, $200,000 on something, people are going to find out. And you can let the users be like, when the people come back and say, that's ridiculous for some random digital card. And there are other people who are like, well, it's a game and you should check it out. And, it'll turn some people off, but it'll make other people be like, oh, that's interesting. What is it about this digital card that people think is going to be worth that much? And that starts the conversation to get them involved in that. Yeah. Mike Bassentay's rabbit hunting was brought to us by Grouchy Laird. I'm telling you, that Nishikawa's clean sheet really got me going on this one. We'll have to come up with a new name now because it's not rabbit hunting anymore. It's just Laird complains for an hour. But I don't know. But thank you to everybody for joining us. Me and my cards. Thank you for joining me. If you guys could please hit the like button, always appreciated. I will say I'm asking a bunch of people in a chat right now who are normally in the chat, but I was considering putting this on the Sorare Data podcast feed as well. And I know I show a lot of things on the screen sometimes, so that could be kind of frustrating if you're listening, but I don't know. Does somebody would you want to listen? As weird as this sounds, since you guys just watched me for over an hour, would you want to listen to the same person for an hour, or do I just keep that as keep the podcast feed as the multi voices? Mike's saying I should call this Gripes with Laird. If I call it Gripes with Laird, there's 100% going to be a situation where I make like some graphic and I accidentally type in Grapes with Laird, and then there's just going to be a meme on that. Clement, thanks for joining. No, no, it's not less painful. I should actually have the card up that was making me painful. Here we go. Whoops. This is the part of the podcast where it's not such a great listen as I click around on my screen trying to get the Luka Doncic unique card pulled up. It's a great card too. Good luck to anybody who is going in on it. So, especially because of the ode of, oh no, it's not an ode for niceness. That's right. That's right. So Charlie's saying looking down with Laird. Yeah, let's not do that. Let's get back to being nice. So yeah, thank you to everybody for joining. If you could please hit the like button, that'd be a really nice thing for you guys to do, because apparently those types of things matter. And if there's any feedback or anything, feel free to hit me up. My Twitter handle is right there at Andrew M. Laird. And yeah, let's just try to be nice to each other. Let's do that. I'll talk to you guys next week.